It's really sterling. Alrighty. I think that we're gonna get going. All right. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining our event today. I am thrilled and so excited to have Brandy Colbert here and to be able to not only host, but to be able to have a conversation with her as well. She is an accomplished author. She has gotten a Stonewall Award for one of her books, Little and Lion, and it is so exciting to have her here. I can't even tell you. So anyway, she has written across age groups, engaging a wide audience in so many different topics. I've been doing a bit more research, not just reading your works, but also doing a bit more research, and literally there's so many different topics you go on. Some of her works include The Only Black Girls in Town, The Revolution of Bertie Randall, and so many other short stories and essays. For tonight, we're going to be talking about this one. It is the voting booth. So as we continue to discuss it throughout it, you can always put in the question, like I said earlier, down at the bottom, and we will go over it. Also in the chat box, you can go over there, and over there, there's going to be a link, and it will show you where you can purchase the book. So if you want to do that anytime throughout the event, go for it. Last but not least, with the question and answer button in the middle, when you are using that, we would love you to do it. But we do ask that you remember that this is a creative space, safe space, and that our author is doing amazing work, but please do remember to be curious and also kind while you use it. Thank you guys so much. So on to our event. Brandy, how are you doing today?
Hi, Hannah. I am doing really well. Thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
I'm so excited. Okay, if you haven't gotten that yet already, apparently I just can't stop talking about it. Okay, so first but not least, can you tell us just like an elevator pitch version of the story itself?
Yes, so the voting booth, I have a copy here because this is like the realest thing, pandemic publishing. I still haven't gotten my finished copies, but I feel better when I hold the book and I talk about it. So we're going to do that. So the voting booth is about these two teens, Marva and Duke, and it's about their adventures on election day. So Marva is really like type A, like really motivated. She's been waiting for this moment her entire life. And Duke is a little more apathetic. He comes from like a politically minded family, but he's just kind of like doing his duty to vote, partially in order to honor his late activist brother. And so they meet at the polls. Marva has successfully voted. She's of course the first one in line, and she sees Duke getting turned away because of registration problems when she's leaving, and she takes it upon herself to insert herself fully into this guy's life, this complete stranger, and they go on an adventure from there.
It's amazing. So I guess the best area to start in is, like you said, this is just a day. This is election day. So what made you want to do an entire novel based off of one day in 24 hours?
Yeah, well, it's super scary, first of all, because I had never written a book set in a day, and I really loved reading them, but I never assumed that was something I would be able to do. But I thought like there's just a real immediacy and urgency to reading and writing a book set in a day. You know, the stakes are so much higher. Everything happens quickly. You know where it's going to end, at least in terms of the timeline by the end of the book. So I thought it would be really interesting to do that based on this sort of day that we all take for granted, election day, and just to see what that would look like, and you know how, I guess, especially first-time voters would handle that too.
Yeah. Random side note, there's a theory in plays that Aristotle had rules and it had to happen in a 24-hour period. And the entire time I was like, oh my goodness, it's like a play but a book.
I love that.
So next one is going to be, I'm finding good ones. Okay, just like we were just talking about, there's so much depth that's happening in this one day. And so it's obvious that there's so much more work that you did outside of this 24-hour period. What was that writing process like?
Yeah, I always really like books that have, you know, like flashbacks to them. My second book had sort of a similar structure with flashbacks because, you know, if you're covering like a certain this specific period of time, like you said, there's only so much you can know about the characters. You're meeting them on this one day and just following them for one day. So you're going to have some background information. So I had to sort of work with even some of the characters who aren't really on the page all that much, like Duke's late brother Julian, and even you know, one of my favorite characters, the cat, the internet famous cat, Eartha Kitty. Um, so, you know, I think building those characters, it was definitely more character development that maybe you don't get to see on the page in the present day, but you definitely see as Marva and Duke talk about, you know, their lives, because they are also just meeting for the first time. So they don't know much about each other. So it was really cool to get to play with that sort of through their conversations, and then also through the flashback chapters of building up these people and situations.
Yeah. So talking about the cat, I'm just gonna go there for 2 seconds. What made you want to add like this whole other side to Marva, where she's like so intense when it comes to voting and registration and having a voice, and then she has this amazing cat page where she's also doing activism work in an odd way, but it's the total flip side.
Yeah, I mean, Marva's a pretty odd person. She's great. Yeah, she's really serious. She's super focused. She, you know, is, I think, on track to be either valedictorian or salutatorian at her school. She goes to a really like rigorous private school. And, you know, again, she's like known she's wanted to vote for her whole life. She knows she wants to be involved in politics in some way. But then, yeah, she has this cat that her parents got her her freshman year because she had just transferred to her school and she was having a tough time kind of fitting in, and as one of the only Black kids there, also feeling like she didn't fit in that way. And so her parents found this cat in a probably like grocery store parking lot, I think, and brought it home. And she was like, well, I'm not really a cat person, but then she like falls in love with the cat instantly. And yeah, she starts like posting pictures on social media and finds that it's just really calming. It's like it's a different part of her that she gets to open up and just be kind of like silly with this cat and do these elaborate photo shoots, and hide behind this, because if she's worried that if anybody actually knew that, you know, Marva Sheridan was behind this account, they wouldn't take her seriously. And so then she also, one part I like to talk about is kind of how she got her name. So the cat's name is Selma, you know, to commemorate the march that took place in Selma, Alabama, but also her internet name is Eartha Kitty, obviously named after the late great Eartha Kitt. And her dad suggested that. And Marva's like, well, you know, I don't know, like Eartha Kitt, like, okay, she played Catwoman, but like, why should I name this cat after her? And her dad, she goes on to do some research and realizes that like Eartha Kitt actually was this amazing person who had these two sides. You know, she was a wonderful performer and kind of like seen as a sex symbol in some ways, but also was like a huge activist and really fought hard for, you know, the rights of Black people and also like the rights of the LGBTQIA plus community. So I think that that also showed like that Marva's finally, she figured out that you can have two different sides, and just because you have this fun side doesn't mean that you can't also have the serious side that's like getting things done at the same time.
Oh yeah. No, I related so much to Marva, and so I loved having that because as a kid everyone was like, "You're too serious, Hannah," and then I was like, "But see, you could be serious and you can have fun."
Exactly, they're not mutually exclusive.
Okay. So like you were saying, there's two characters and there's so much depth in between them. So was it ever hard to choose whose point of view we're going to see and learn from in each chapter as the story continued?
Yeah, I think that was sort of like an organization thing, which thankfully my editor helped me with. I'm not big on outlining, but for this book, we did work on a couple of outlines together because it's, you know, a book set in a day, two different perspectives. Like there's got to be a little more organization going on than normal. So yeah, it was really interesting. I think there were a couple of times through editing where I actually had to go back and rearrange chapters and maybe write one from a perspective, you know, after cutting another one. And it got a little dicey there for a while, just for me, who has problems keeping up with stuff like that, organizing while I write. But yeah, I really liked it. It was a good challenge. Like I said, I had never done it before. So I thought it was really a cool way of playing with the pacing and the plot in a way that I don't normally get to do, because, it feels almost like each character has to have their own specific story arc within their chapters, but then also really coordinate with the other characters' chapters and tell a complete story through both of them. So that's something that I look back at now that I can talk about. But at the time, I was just sort of writing, just trying to get the story out. But yeah, it was a really good challenge. I really liked it. Of course, I think there were some things that I would have loved to have been able to tell from both of their points of view. But I feel like they both were able to like make the most important points.
I agree. I loved it whenever it switched, because I don't know if this is probably a bad thing to say, but sometimes I'll get like somewhat annoyed of one person's voice if I read them for too long in a book. And then whenever it switched to Duke, I was like, oh, hello, I'm in this head. And then whenever it switched back to Marva, I was like, oh, and now I'm fully determined. It was just really great to have the back and forth. So let's see. Doop-a-doo. Oh, yeah. So like you said, there's so many other characters that are going on. Like we haven't even hit Ida. And is that how you pronounce her name? Just make
Yeah. Yes, Ida.
Okay. But Ida is so amazing in so many ways, and so are so many of the other ones. Julian is also astounding. So was it hard to come up with the areas that they were really passionate about? Because both are passionate about so many different areas of activism and in different areas. Was it hard to come up with a fully rounded character for both of them?
That's a great question. No, it really was not. It was actually speaking of getting to spend time with characters, I almost wish that I could have spent more time with Ida especially, and even Julian. He's passed away, but we get to see him through flashbacks and really just see the influence that he had over both of his siblings. So for anyone who hasn't read the book, Julian is Duke's older brother, and he passed away. He was really big on gun violence activism, and ultimately that's what killed him. And then there's Duke in the middle, and then they have a younger sister named Ida, who is really, she's in the social justice club at school. She's interested in civil disobedience, and abortion rights is one thing that she's really passionate about. So yeah, I guess it just kind of made sense to me that this family, who their parents aren't necessarily involved in politics, but they're really politically minded, and they made sure that their kids went with them to vote when they were younger, and that Duke's mom, especially at the beginning of this book, is like, you're going to vote before school, you're taking your little sister with you. They're very he knows that being a part of that family means that he has to have some sort of civic engagement. But I thought it was really fun to sort of build out his siblings and see how they were so different from him, but also, like you said, they each had their different passions. And I would, love to write a book from Ida's perspective. Yes. Someday. She would be so fun.
She would be so gung-ho. She would just be like, and now we're taking the flag and running.
Yes, exactly. And I love that sort of I was able to show the different types of activism, because both she and Marva are really determined and really passionate about, what they do, but they're still very different. Yeah. Marva would not be like that. She's very by the book, but you're right. Ida would be the type to just be like, we're going to go knock down some monuments. We're taking this flag down. Exactly.
That's another thing. Okay, this wasn't one of my questions originally, but oh well. But that's something that I loved about this, was that you allowed each person to experience their own version of activism, no matter what form that was, even if it wasn't a stereotypical type. So that was amazing. If you want to talk about that, you can go for it. But yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah, thanks. I think, I don't know, of course, when I was writing this book, I started writing it in late 2018, but mostly, late 2018, early 2019. So of course, the world looked, not totally different, but, different from what it looks like now. And I just never imagined that we would be having, this movement that we're in the middle of. And I don't know, I think a lot of people, they look at protesters and people who are really putting themselves out there very bravely, on the front lines with all of this, and they sort of feel guilty. And I know that I've been in that position before, where it's well, I'm not out protesting, but I just really think it's important for people to remember that they have to do what's comfortable for them, as long as it's something. So I think if you're not protesting, like you can be home, you can call your representatives, email your representatives, you can go door to door and canvas, you can text bank, phone bank, write postcards. There's so much stuff that can be done. And for me, I'm not really a protester, because like Marva, I kind of worry about, getting a little too upset with the counter protesters, but I am really good at talking to people about things. So I'm not afraid to get into uncomfortable situations with people and just really talk something out to death. So I just think, yeah, it's important for people to remember, like, you're not a failure because you can't do this form of protest, but just like do something, just use your voice in some way and do it in a way that, you're passionate about.
Fantastic. This also wasn't an original question, but oh well, apparently that's gone to the wayside a little. We'll come back. But something that really sparked my mind while I was reading this book was, when did I first see voter suppression and when did that first impact me? And for me, it was at college, because we were obviously not where we normally live. And so trying to vote was difficult. Would you like to speak anything about voter suppression and how that really, first of all, how it maybe has been a part of your life or in the vicinity, or also just how it also became part of this novel?
Yeah, so I have not, luckily, have not had any experiences with voter suppression, but it's something that's really near and dear to my heart, because my family is from the South. So my parents both grew up in rural Arkansas, and they grew up on like the tail end of Jim Crow, like the 50s and the 60s. And so I know that they saw, voter suppression there. And I just, like, I didn't learn much about this in school. So when I finally started educating myself, like the book is dedicated to Fannie Lou Hamer, who was a voting rights activist. And she's Marva's hero as well. And just learning about her and knowing all she did in Mississippi for voting rights really got me, fired up, because I didn't learn about her in school. And so knowing that there was this whole group of people who like actually formed a whole new like Democratic Party because they saw that it was all white delegates. And so they wanted a voice, and, Fannie Lou Hamer testifying in front of Congress. There's just so much there. And just thinking about all the people who came before me and even my parents and, risked their lives and were like brutally beaten and sometimes killed, just trying to get people voting rights is really, really powerful to me. And then I think about how voter suppression has changed a lot. So, I think people think about voter suppression and they often think like way back, in the early 1900s or, mid 1900s, where it was like poll taxes and like literacy tests. And so it doesn't look like that anymore, but now it looks like, closing polling precincts, forcing people to try to find transportation or take off work or, wait in line for hours, not allowing mail-in ballots, so much stuff. Like, I think that people don't actually look at as voter suppression because they think it looks a very specific way, but in fact, it's like unfortunately still happening around the country.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I just a quick backtrack. I don't mean that my experiences as all has represented anything that other people are going through at this moment in this time, especially what's come in November. But it was the first time that I really started thinking about it, and it was like, oh, this could be far worse for someone else than just to find some mail.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I mean, it really does hit people differently. And I think everyone wants to have one definition, but it's like, in fact, no, it looks so many different ways. So I think it's important for everyone to acknowledge the different ways it affects them, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Back to the book. So Duke, he has this amazing ability to be both vicarious in some ways, I would say, but then also be able to be a leader for his sister as well. And so like he's also very complex. And then Marva has all of her different ranges, which we already talked about. Which ones do you think that you relate to the most within this story? Because there's so many. Her dad's another one. Like there's so many great characters. Who do you feel like you relate to the most?
Thank you. It's funny. I actually like usually say I relate to the dads in my books a lot. I don't know that means exactly. But in this book, not. I would say that I have a little bit of myself in both Duke and Marva. I really had to come to terms the past couple of years that I have a bit of type A personality in me. I was always like, people say you're so laid back, and I'm like, well, but they don't know what's actually going on in here. So I have a bit of that, definitely not to the extreme that is Marva. And then, Duke, I think people might see me as a little more laid back, like I said. And so I feel I definitely related to some parts of him, and just being like, it's just gonna work out. Like it's chill. So yeah, but I would say there's always a little bit of me in like every character, because I see a little bit of me in Ida, and even Marva's dad, whom I also really like. So yeah, I think it's nice to be able to. It would feel a little like fan fiction if I wrote a character that felt too much like me, and it would feel, I don't know, like I don't think I could actually do it, because I would be too worried about trying to get it like right. So, but yeah, I think a little bit of me filters into each one, and they were both super fun to write, especially like in comparison to one another.
Yeah. So as we start wrapping up this part and moving on into the Q&A, 2 more questions. First one is, what areas do you think YA readers could continue the conversation in through research or through involvement?
I mean, I would say, I think we've learned in the past few months that a lot of people don't know anything about really like the history of Black Americans in this country. And, we sort of bill it as Black history. We have the whole month for Black history, but Black history is American history. And so I would just really urge people to like do some digging around. And like I said, when I had realized I had to do my own research to really find out about the history of my community, it's really informed so much of, like my work and my outlook on the world, and just so much more stuff makes sense. So I would really urge people to do some history on, or some research, some reading, not just, fiction, but nonfiction, and look up some things about Black Americans in the past, because there's a lot of great information that's not being taught in schools that's out there.
Yeah, just like voter suppression. Sometimes
yes.
You have to dig for it just a wee bit, or a lot. So then last kind of question is, just like you said, doing reading and nonfiction and fiction, are there other authors, are there other books that would continue this conversation so that once they read this, they can keep learning and keep digging? That's on the top of your head.
Yeah, I'm actually currently reading The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson. I feel like I'm super late to it. Everyone has told, it's been out 10 years. It won the Pulitzer Prize. Everyone has told me it's an amazing book, but it is really one of the best books I've ever read. It's about the Great Migration of Black Americans from the South to the North and West and Midwest. And it's, I don't even know how to talk about it. It's really that good. It primarily follows 3 migrants from the South as they settle in California, Detroit, and cannot remember the other city. But it's just so like beautifully written. You feel like you really know these people, and you forget for a while that it's nonfiction. But I think it also does a really good job of talking about how Black Americans who moved from the South really had a similar experience as an immigrant experience. People who come from other countries to the U.S. But it's such a gorgeous book. It's really big, so it can look intimidating, but it's such a wonderful read. So I highly recommend that one.
That's really cool. I was maybe 14 at the time, so I haven't read it either. So you're not the only one that's late to this conversation.
Okay, good.
So how do we feel about going to the Q&A?
Let's do it.
Ready. Okay. So once again, just for everyone that is on here, you can always ask questions. Please do. We'll go through as many as possible. So let's go at the top. Oh, also you can vote on them. I forgot about this. So you can vote on the ones that you like, and you can always add it up so that then they'll go to the top, and then we'll be able to see which ones everyone wants to hear about. Okay, so up at the top. This one is, and if I don't pronounce your names right, I am so sorry. That's That's just me saying sorry. Okay. So Sele says that she loves Marva. She is so unique and interesting. Is she based on someone that you know?
No, she is not. Not at all. Like I said, there's a little bit of me in her, but I just really wanted to show this sort of, I mean, I think she's a little bit quirky, but really determined, you know, just young Black girl. I don't know if we really get to see that. Like, I don't really remember reading about a Black girl who was super interested in politics, and who's, you know, would take a whole day off from her very intense school schedule to make sure that someone else gets registered to vote or gets their vote in for the day. So yeah, she was really fun to write, but she was not based on anyone in particular.
Lovely. So the next one it's from Carolyn. Was there a voice that you enjoyed writing more than some of the other voices?
I would say, gosh, I don't know. I hate to choose. It feels like when someone asks me like what my favorite of my own books is. I don't know. I will say like Duke slightly edges out Marva for me, which feels like a betrayal since, you know, she's my female character. But he was just really, it was really fun to write his story arc, especially because seeing him go from sort of this apathetic voter who's just kind of doing his duty to him realizing that his voice really matters and that he can do more to use it and more to help people around him, and that, you know, that might also help him deal a little bit with the grief from his brother. Just felt really kind of powerful in a way to see him, you know, start on that journey as the day progresses.
Oh yeah. A side comment. Was it difficult? Once again, I was young, so I have not read every single one of your books. So if I'm wrong, let me know. But is this one of the first times that you've used a male voice in one of your books? Or
Yeah, it definitely is. So that was another thing. Like, just tried so many new things with this book. I was terrified. So I'm happy that, you know, people are responding to it. But yeah, that was the first time. To be honest with you, don't read a lot of male authored fiction, or, you know, fiction about men or boys. So yeah, I was I was a little nervous about it. But you know, I just kind of drew with, I have always had a lot of male friends. So I just kind of drew from that. And, you know, then of course, like I said, put a little bit of me in there too.
yeah. Side note, another one. We'll keep having them. Um, so this book has two different families, and they seem connected, but also one of them is a bit more broken, as you all know. But did anything of your family life at all play into that, or is it just something that you were once again trying for the first time?
Yeah, no, my parents are divorced, like Duke's parents got divorced,
Okay.
but yeah, I'm lucky enough not to have, like, my parents' divorce did not look like his parents' divorce was pretty volatile, and like they all saw it coming, and that was not the case with me. So no, it wasn't. And I luckily have not, you know, had a sibling pass away. I have an older brother. He is not anything like Julian in the book. So yeah, no, not like my family. And then, you know, Marva's family is pretty cheerful, and her parents are together. So
Yeah.
that's like more like what I would picture, you know, my younger childhood like. But yeah, no, it was all sort of just an experiment. And I found Duke's family really fun. I mean, they were both really fun to write, but I found his family really fun to write because I like writing about complicated situations and people. So got
Yeah.
lots of that in his family.
Well, it was a really fun experiment for me to read, so.
Glad.
Oh man. Did you ask what, or did you say I'm glad?
Oh, I said I'm glad.
Oh, okay, solid.
Yes.
Then the next one is from Jessica. She says, I haven't read the book, which it sounds great. But it sounds like you're so on top of teen culture, especially social media. How, as an adult, do you remain engaged in that world?
My gosh, that's like the coolest thing anyone's said to me in a long time, because I don't feel like I have any idea what's going on. I keep thinking with every book that, you know, teens are going to call me out and be like, you don't know what our life is like. But I do, I never really stopped watching, you know, like teen shows. And I try to keep up with as much of teen culture as I can, like through, you know, probably Instagram would be the best place that I can really find like actual, you know, find out information about actual teens. But I don't have that many in my life. Like I don't have kids, and most of my friends' kids are still a little bit younger. I do have a niece who's, you know, just graduating from high school this year, and she lives in Arizona, so I don't get to see her very often. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would say it's just kind of through the media, and just kind of trying to pay attention when teens are actually speaking, because I think they're fascinating and interesting and so smart and have so much great stuff to say. And they have, I think, a bigger platform than, you know, I was a teenager in the 90s and the internet did not exist like it does today at all. So I think that they have just like a great platform. So I really try to pay attention to what they're interested in. And, you know, I'm always so honored when an actual teen reads my book and, you know, talks to me about it, because, you know, we're writing for teens, but I think a lot of adults read YA too. So it's always really nice to hear from them and to hear when they think I've gotten it right. That really means the world.
Yeah. And I'm not really in that demographic, but I was like, I feel like this is something that my brothers would do so many times, and they're still in high school, as a reference. So the next one is by Amy, and she asks, did you base this book off of something? Like, I guess as in, was this book sparked from something in your life?
No, it's not based off of any particular thing. I think like when I started working on it at the end of 2018, I was thinking, okay, well, you know, it's going to come out in 2020, which is obviously going to be an election year, and just assumed at the time that the election would be the biggest thing we were talking about this year. Turns out not the case. So, you know, I was looking at it from like a sort of a different perspective, just thinking like this would be really interesting to actually show what voting looks like. Because I think unless you had the, you know, chance to go with your parents to the polls when you were younger, a lot of teens don't actually know what that looks like. So I thought it would be just really interesting to sort of be like, okay, here's what it's going to look like when you get there, when you actually vote. And then, of course, because it has to be a story with problems, you know, here are some of the obstacles that you could run into. So yeah, not based on anything, but just hoping that, you know, be able to get a compelling story out of a one day, you know, book set in a day based on voting.
Yeah, I thought it was really genius that you added in that they were still in high school, because that was just another layer on top of everything else. But that high schoolers also get a vote if they're 18, which is really astonishing.
I know, I was too young to vote in high school, so I didn't get to vote till I was like 21 actually, because I missed the election by like a year. But
yeah, same. But some people have power young.
Yes.
So the next part is, what did you enjoy most about writing for teens?
Oh my gosh, I love
By
it.
Michelle.
Yeah, I love writing about teens. I think so I think a lot of YA authors talk about how they like had a horrible time in high school. They didn't like it. I actually had like, you know, my big secret is that I had a great time in high school. I really actually like loved it. So for me, it's not painful at all. It's just like being able to sort of go back and enjoy it and explore like these maybe things I didn't get to do, or like maybe, you know, what would it have been like if I was in this group instead of like the one I was in. It's always interesting to me to do that. But plus, I just think like at that age, like there's so much new stuff. And I wrote my first middle grade book that came out earlier this year. And it's kind of the same where I'm like, everything's kind of new and you're coming into your voice. But like as a teen, you know, you do have some independence that you don't have as a middle school kid. So you are able to drive, and you know, if you're older and you're able to go out with your friends and sort of have a freedom for the first time in your life that you've never really had before. So I think it's so interesting to explore that. And then also just, yeah, this like sense of like everything's new and you want to experience everything. And I just think it's such a fun time to look back on.
Oh yeah. Also, another thing about it being in high school and them having all these other priorities like Duke's band and her with the cat, it was really interesting to see them weigh like what's more important. Is voting more important or this other thing that's happening? And it was really interesting to see them have to balance these things, which is what you have to learn when you're leaving high school and entering the rest of the world. Yeah, it was really interesting. If you want to talk about that, you can. I'm just
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Yeah, I think you're also faced with like a lot of decisions that you haven't had to make before, that can sort of, affect you in ways that you haven't had to think about before, could affect your future. And even just the decision to vote, you're primarily making a decision to vote on policies and procedures that are going to affect you for the people you know and love for many years down the road. So I think, yeah, it's like a sense of responsibility there too.
completely agree. Let's go to the next one. So, let's go with Michelle's question. She wants to know, what are you working on now? And do you have any upcoming projects? Since you have so much time with COVID.
Right, I know. Like, I feel like I was telling you before the event started that I just feel like I spent the first 2 months of the pandemic like fretting and not getting anything done, and now I'm regretting that deeply. But I am working on another book that was announced recently, so it'll be my next book out, and it's a nonfiction book for younger readers. I'm not exactly sure. I'm not done writing it yet, so I'm not sure where exactly it will fall. But either YA or middle grade and YA, and it's about the Tulsa race massacre of 1921, which is an event that I did not learn about until just a few years ago. It's again something that's not really taught in history class, and I've heard that from so many people who are like, I didn't learn about it until an adult. People who lived in Tulsa or lived in Oklahoma who didn't know about it until recently. And the show Watchmen that was on HBO kind of dug into it, which was really interesting. So that could be a good place to start if you like, superhero comic book stuff too. But yeah, I'm going to write a nonfiction book. So it's just going to be, about the event and sort of what led up to it, and then, the legacy of it as well. So it's, pretty harrowing subject matter. But I am really excited to be able to give a voice to that, and hopefully more people will be able to learn about it and pick it up. And I have 2 more YA books that will be out. I can't talk about them yet, but just know that they should be announced soon-ish. And so just know there's more YA fiction coming from me too. Very excited about it.
That's amazing. For one of them, the first one that you were talking about, I didn't know much about that until it came across Facebook about 6 times in one day, and eventually I was like, I should probably look this up. But another thing that came up recently was we just did Kent State, and the author just left my head. I had it 2 seconds ago. It'll come back in my life. But
was it was it a man or?
No, it was she. We did
Okay.
with her, and it's a whole thing. I should know this name, and it's like, but
it's okay.
She did it on the Kent State massacre, which was another moment in history that I knew nothing about. And so, anyway, now I'm really excited about yours because I can learn more.
Yeah, I know there's so much stuff that's kind of, and I was asking because I was on a panel with a man who had written a book, I'm pretty sure, about that recently also. But yeah, there's so much that I feel like gets either just like glossed over. Like I remember, maybe like a couple paragraphs about Kent State in my history books, but they don't really dig into it. So I'm really happy that, there's people writing nonfiction, including me, that can hopefully help get these stories out there.
Yeah. It needs to happen. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we'll never know. Okay, so I'm going to ask one last question, and then we'll start wrapping this up. All right. Okay. It just moved. There we go. It is from Colette, and it says, I'm intrigued by your t-shirt. Do you have a French connection?
I do not. I wish I did, and it's still wet from my hair, but it says ça suffit, which means like, sorry if this translation is not perfect, but from what I read, it's that's enough. And it's a partnership with this company and Everytown for gun safety, I believe is the name. So yeah, the proceeds went to that, which, you know, I appreciate. But yeah, my last name, I think, is French. My brother has been doing like genealogy research. He says it's Scottish. I don't know, but that would be the biggest French connection I think that I would have. I grew up taking Spanish lessons, and French never came easily to me. Yeah, the pronunciations just don't roll off the tongue for me, but I think it's a beautiful language. And I was actually like planning to try to go to France this year. So I'm very sad. So I think I'm trying to like live it out through my wardrobe instead.
No, that's awesome. Before we even started this event, I was like, so do I pronounce your name in the French way or not? So now this comment is making me laugh. We're just wrapping it back up. So there is one comment, and then I guess there's another question that I'm also interested about. So I take it back. I lied. We're not stopping. We're going to do this one comment and then one last question. This comment is by Sele again. She did the first question, or he did the first question. I don't know which. But it begins by talking about automatic voter registration and that it was passed by the New York State legislature here today, which is great. Oh,
that's amazing.
But great. It will help address the state's consistency, low voter participation and turnout. Hurrah. And then it says, thank you, Brandy, for standing up and shining a light on such an important voting issue and such a wonderful novel for young adults.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate it.
So now for the last question. This one's from Donna, and I think it's just a good way to end in a lot of ways. Great conversation. Is there a discussion guide for your book that could be used for book groups?
Oh gosh, there's not, but I will talk to my editor and see if we can get that going, because I think that would be really helpful, especially, you know, as whatever type of learning, you know, kicks back into gear in the fall and with the election coming up. Yeah, I think that would be a really great idea. So I will bring that up to my publisher for sure.
Fantastic. Okay, so thank you so much for your honesty and for your engagement and for everything tonight. It was such a pleasure. So for everyone that's at home, back in the chat, there is the lovely, lovely link that will say, would you like to purchase the book? Here's the link. If you want to do that, please go for it. You can do that anytime, and then it will pull up on our website for Politics and Prose. Another thing that you can do is you can follow our social media handles. They are @KidsInProse, and so we'll be on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, so go for all those. And then last but not least, I want to ask you what you have been reading lately.
Oh yeah, so I talked about The Warmth of Other Suns, which is amazing. So that's sort of my primary book, but I have been buying so many books through this whole pandemic. Like, I don't know where I'm going to put them all soon.
I know.
Kind of getting, yeah, I mean, that looks like so neat, but pretty soon I'm not going to have any bookshelf space, so we'll see how that goes. But
yeah, they're all on my floor. I wish I could show you this pile of books on my
okay, so you get it. Yeah, I can't stop. And it's also great because then I get to support, you know, my favorite indie bookstores like Politics and Prose. But yeah, so I've also been buying a lot of poetry and a lot of plays. So I'm also like slowly working my way through Life on Mars by Tracy K. Smith.
Yes.
Okay, are you familiar?
Yes, it's on my floor because I don't.
Oh my God.
I have read it.
It's so gorgeous, but I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to read this poem. Like, I can only read like one poem a day and like read it over and over. And then I'm like, oh, this is so smart and just so wonderful. So I've been like buying up all the poetry and some plays and yeah, just really trying to like expand my reading more than it is right now.
Love that. Same. Okay, so it has been amazing. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. I think that we are done. So thank you, audience, for spending this time with us as well. Goodbye.
Yes, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.